So, I mean, a guy like Norton, who's an environmental pragmatist, although not one who I would necessarily identify with, there's considerable variety in this environmental pragmatist school of thought. Norton's has some metaphysical issues too, from my perspective. But his concern about making questionable metaphysical commitments, or I think what he might call questionable ontological, questionable thought commitments, conceptual commitments regarding the nature of being, or the nature of the universe, or what all these difficult concepts require some metaphysical analysis. Even just questions about the nature of nature. What is nature? That's a metaphysical inquiry, right? A metaphysical inquiry, in a very rudimentary sense, involves a clarification of the meaning of key terms that philosophers use all the time. All right. So when we go around inquiring about the nature of value, for example, the nature of value in natural resources, we have to, in part, do some metaphysical work. And these neo-Kantians make this really kind of profound argument. It's the basic move that characterizes modern philosophy since Kant. And it's this assertion. It starts with an assertion that we have access to the noumenal realm, to a noumenal realm. Okay, noumena, kind of substitute the kind of the word ideas. The opposite of noumena, not the opposite, but the contrast term is phenomena. Phenomena is all the stuff. The speaking, the words, the walking, the wind blowing, everything that actually happens is a phenomenon, right? So there's the phenomenal world. Then there's also the noumenal world, right? And that's the world of ideas. That's the world of the development and evolution of the Occident, right? The spirit of Western thought, the spirit of Western philosophy. Since we're here in the West, that's what we kind of restrict ourselves. Obviously, the spirit of the Orient has its own, Anyway, but there's this basic idea among all the neo-Kantians that we have access to an understanding of this noumenal realm, wherein the relationships between all the phenomena, right? And these are all phenomena too, right? These are different entities in nature. We've got the humans, and we've got the deer, the ungulates, and we've got the wolves, the predators, right? We've got the trees, the vegetable matter. We've got the rain, the climate systems, right? And we've got the sun. And we've got, of course, the fish in the rivers, and we've got the oceans over here. And all of these phenomena, if we are neo-Kantians, conduct themselves, interact with one another according to certain universal laws. And now that's an easily accepted, we commonly accept that hypothesis when it comes to the physical laws, right? What they actually do empirically, and that's what scientists study. But neo-Kantians are saying something more than that. They're saying that there are also, in the noumenal realm, that we have the special metaphysical access to, there are necessary moral obligatory relationships, at least among humans and all these other entities. These other entities don't have the rationality and the autonomy to understand the way that the humans do. So only the humans think in these terms. But humans are obligated to think in these terms because their rationality discloses to them the necessary intrinsic universal relationships which inhere among all these different elements in nature, right? And one thing perhaps the radical neo-Kantian environmentalist is saying is that, and then maybe this could be the sole content of whatever spiritual quality the radical environmentalist might appeal to. She might just be saying, the radical environmentalist might just be saying, look, there's an order, and if you study the world, if you educate yourself on ecology and biology and how all these different things in nature interact, you'll learn that yes, indeed, there is an objective order, and that objective order includes relationships of obligation, of dependency, of reciprocity, right? All these things are real. They're not just made up. They're not just subjective, right? They're objectively present. And if you understand ecology, you see that they're. Now, of course, the key question is, okay, we know these objective relationships exist, but do they really have a moral dimension to them, right? And so let's try to dig a little bit deeper into that, all right? But just keep that in mind. This is a picture of the way these different ideas relate in the noumenal realm, okay? And from an understanding of that, we are to derive an absolute ethic, okay? Right? And we can think in categorical terms. right? Not just in outcome-driven terms, but we can think in categorical terms about right and wrong, absolute right and absolute wrong. Okay, that's what the Neo-Kantians propose through their special metaphysical access to the noumenal realm. And that's a very questionable, we need to pause and note, we're as good philosophers. And of course, this has been the hotly debated ever since Kant, right? Whether or not we really do have this special kind of metaphysical access to this special, right? Those of you who've had other philosophy classes, like in ancient Greek philosophy, think of Plato's idea of forms, right? His theory of forms. There are these forms out there, and they're real forms, and we can get closer and closer to understanding them, right? And the world of ideal forms is what a Neo-Kantian would characterize as the noumenal realm, right? The realm of ideas. All these great philosophers, you'll notice, the utilitarians don't want to do this. They resist this move, and a lot of modern thinkers don't resist this move. But throughout history, there is this idea among the towering greats in Western philosophy that there is an objective order, right? Not only to the physical universe, but also to sort of the aesthetic and moral dimensions of that universe. Okay? And in thinking that way, that way of thinking necessarily takes us out of the empirical world. Okay? And that's a very important point. And from my tradition of environmental practice, William James will call out these Kantians, just hardcore. He'll call them on the carpet and just say, you guys are making these very questionable metaphysical commitments, and there's really no basis. And actually, I have a much better, and I can accomplish what you guys say you're accomplishing without making these. And that's what the pragmatist says. But anyway, so we have to note, always pause and note kind of the breathtaking nature of the claim that's being made. But it's still an attractive claim too. Maybe there is something breathtaking in the mere act of using one's reason, right? That's what Neo-Kantians assert. There's something breathtaking in the mere act because you have to assume all these other deeper meanings whenever you go about thinking. You cannot think the thought of a human being, for example, without deeper commitments. Really, all of modern philosophy, I know this sounds very rudimentary and broad and sweeping, but this is a survey level class, so I can make these kind of broad and sweeping claims. But all of modern philosophy is an effort to think the thinking that's going on behind the scenes. And sometimes it's not thinking, right? Sometimes the thinking sometimes it's feeling, right? Sometimes it's the subconscious, right? Sometimes it's the spirit of history, right? If you're a Marxist, right? If you're a Freudian, then what's important, that what's happening behind the scenes that determines what you're observing is the subconscious, right? Anyway, and Kant says, right, that you have to assume certain essential metaphysical points about the nature of the human being in order to think about our relationships with each other. Okay? So I just want to point out, though, this is where we're trying to reconstruct. We still haven't gotten away from Milstein. We're still trying to pin down deontological ecocentrism as opposed, right? This is the Neo-Kantian ecocentrism, as opposed to the Neo-Humean. That's ecocentrism, that's Neo-Humean ecocentrism, for lack of a better term. All right? This is Neo-Kantian. Rolston is the guy who develops this understanding of radical environmental ethics most clearly. Okay? And I know we haven't read Rolston yet. We will after we read Stone. First we read Stone, then we read Tom Regan on animal rights. Next Tuesday is our only real animal rights day. And then after that we get into Rolston. All right? But Rolston is the guy, who really develops this deontological egocentric view, a lot more than Collicutt, right? Because Collicutt, remember, is still tied down by his consequentialist commitments, right? But once you make this metaphysical claim that you have access to the noumenal realm, right, then you understand the necessary inherent relationships between all these entities in the ecosystem, right? And then you don't need to do the consequentialist analysis in order to determine that a certain act is right or wrong, right? You just look and see if the act is more or less. It's never going to be perfectly consistent, right? Because you never have a perfect order. You'll never have a perfect understanding, right? But roughly speaking, an environmental manager can tailor his actions so that they're more or less, so that the results of his or her actions are more or less consistent with these universal laws that apply between all the different elements that I have on the board that are now covered by the screen. Right? You guys understand that? Okay? And so again, this is a non-consequentialist normative theory because it says that the test, the true test of the moral rightness or wrongness of a resource management decision is whether or not it takes care. Does it conform with this principle? Okay? That's where the rightness or wrongness hinges, right? Not on a determination of outcome, but whether it conforms with this. Does it take care to avoid treating ecological wholes as mere means to human ends? Okay? Then all this business about integrity, stability, and beauty, those, as to the best that I can understand Leopold, what he's getting at here, and what a neo-Kantian reading of Leopold would be getting at, is that these are good, these give us an insight into the health of an ecosystem, all right? It's hard to, how do you define the health of an ecosystem? But Leopold throws out these characteristics as being hallmarks of a functioning, healthy ecosystem, right? And so we can look, right, and it's always going to be a judgment call, and that's kind of maybe unsatisfying to many, scientifically. We want a real clear judgment, and yet how do you know when the integrity, and theoretically a lot of actions, we could maybe put a lot of stuff into the air, and it's not all or nothing, right? I mean, a lot of actions might harm the integrity and stability to some degree, right? But not go so far as to destroy the system's ability to renew itself. So in that case, that might not be so bad, right? So anyway, it's always a judgment call, and it's a matter of scale, right? How much of the system's integrity and stability are you willing to sacrifice? At what point does loss of integrity and stability damage the whole to such an extent, right, that it's being reduced, right? Right? If the whole is damaged, that may be the case with Earth's climate systems. They may be so damaged that there's nothing else to conclude that what we've done is reduce them, right? Not intentionally, but that's been the result of our actions. We've reduced Earth's climate system so fully that those actions which are producing that harm are clearly wrong on a Leopoldian, right? On this deontological analysis. Okay? All right, so this is what's difficult. This is the hard stuff, all right? And I want to try not to get too caught up in all this and this difficult stuff because we have a whole bunch of material to get through on Christopher Stone, all right? But here's Kant for you in a nutshell, okay? And I could make, and I should make, another very different sort of diagram up here. I realize these lights are on. I think we'll just stick with the lights on. But Kant gives us these two distinctions between, and I'm going to arrange them this way, and hopefully it'll be the most felicitous way to arrange them. And those of you who've studied any philosophy at all have probably seen this before. But Kant suggests that there are four possible kinds of truth claim, of knowledge claim, of proposition claim. And Kant thinks of moral judgments, of normative claims as being that's a type of truth claim, all right? So, and as we'll see, it's a certain type of truth claim that Kant thinks he's figured out a way to defend through these exotic metaphysical moves that we started to talk about earlier, all right? But Kant says, okay, there's the analytic synthetic. This damn pen is running out of juice. Analytic synthetic distinction, and then we have the I'm not sure what order to put these ones in. Okay, these are Latin terms, and I ran out of room. This is supposed to be a posteriori, and we always put these in italics, by the way, okay? Right, because these are Latin terms, and I have it on my slide what all this means. But what moral judgments consist of, according to Kant, are a priori synthetic claims. And lo and behold, what do the Neo-Humeans say? All right, there are all kinds of a priori synthetic claims that Kant thinks we have access to, right? All the scientific claims we can make about the relationships, about these entities themselves, and all the relationships that accrue between them, et cetera, and the moral obligations that go along with our relationships, right? Okay, but guess what? The neo-Humeans say that this is actually impossible, okay? There is no such thing. We cannot get this kind of knowledge, and that's why moral truth claims cannot be based on anything other than something a posteriori. Namely, guess what? A feeling, right? Right? A response, right? An emotive response of some kind. Remember? That's what the neo-Humeans say. And they go so far as to say that, in fact, reason cannot come up with any kind of... So let's explain what these distinctions mean. All right? So this is a key move, and this is something to remember. The Kantians make the claim that this category of knowledge is available to us. Okay? This, by the way, and what's an example of analytic a priori proposition? Mathematics, any kind of mathematical claim. Formal logic, any kind of mathematical claim. Or as we'll see, some real basic statements about the empirical world. All right? But math is the best example of this. All right? Anyway, let's get back to our slides. And I'm worried I'm going to take up too much time on this, so we might have to spill over into Tuesday and continue covering Stone on Tuesday. But we'll see how far I can get. Okay, so an analytic proposition. Kant ends up telling us there are only three kinds of knowledge claims, only three kinds of propositions. All right, and those three are. This is very unprofessional, isn't it? Anyway, those three are. Anyway, we'll get there. All right. There are four possible, but one's actually, after you think about it, is a contradiction. All right. So, but let's go over these distinctions first. All right. First, there's a distinction between analytic propositions and synthetic propositions. This is very simple stuff. Don't overthink this. All right. An analytic proposition is a proposition whose predicate concept is contained in its subject concept. All right. So, examples: all bachelors are unmarried. Okay. The predicate concept unmarried is contained in the subject concept. Okay? All triangles have three sides. These are kind of all trivially true, is one way to think, right? It's just an obvious statement because the truth of the statement is tied up within the definition of the terms that we include in the statement. Okay? Think of formal logic, think of mathematics. All right? And then these other basic, real simple claims like all bachelors are unmarried. Okay? Each of these statements is an affirmative subject-predicate judgment, and in each the predicate concept is contained within the subject concept. All right? The subject concept bachelor contains the concept unmarried. Likewise, the concept unmarried is part of the definition of the concept bachelor. Okay? And you can say the same about triangle and three sides. All right? Now, synthetic propositions are very different. Okay? A proposition whose predicate concept is not contained in its subject concept but is related. Examples of synthetic propositions include all bachelors are unhappy, or even all creatures with hearts have kidneys. All right? As you can see in these two statements, and most of the statements we make about the real world, okay? Each of these new statements is an affirmative subject-predicate judgment. Okay? However, in none of these cases does the subject concept contain the predicate concept. Okay? The concept bachelor doesn't follow, right? That unhappy. We could pause and make a joke about that, you know. Anyway, I heard there were 3 rings involved in a marriage, right? Should I complete the joke? Yeah. There's the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and the supper ring. So anyway, so it's unhappy, you know, who knows? But the point is, right? You know what's being said here, right? A synthetic proposition to claim about the real world, other than these real simple ones, right? And that's not really a claim about the real world. Notice, all bachelors are unmarried. You're not really referring to anything, right? You're just defining a term. Okay? But in a synthetic judgment, you're always referring to a real thing that's happening, a phenomenon. Okay? All right? The same is true for creatures with hearts and have kidneys. Even if every creature with a heart also has kidneys, the concept creature with a heart does not contain the concept has kidneys. Okay? All right, now, the next very important distinction is the distinction between an a priori proposition and an a posteriori proposition. Okay? This is more easy. Think of your posterior, right, as what's behind you, okay? And then your a priori is what you just, those are the principles you walk into every situation with, all right? There are a priori propositions, and then there are, right, that are null. There could be, right? We still don't know for sure. It turns out this last one, doesn't it, is just a contradiction in terms. Excuse me, well, you'll see when we get to this. Anyway, I'm trying to jump ahead, move too quickly. So let's just stick with this distinction, all right? An a priori proposition is one whose justification does not rely upon experience, all right? It can be validated by experience, but is not grounded in experience. Therefore, it is logically necessary, okay? It can be validated by experience, but is not grounded in experience, okay? The key point, though, is just doesn't rely on experience. Okay, like 7 plus 5 equals 12. It fits together in that abstract map called mathematics, right? This map of abstract concepts called mathematics, that has to go, that follows, right? And it couldn't do anything but follow, all right? And it has nothing, but it's not referring to anything out in the real world. The justification of these propositions does not depend upon experience. One need not consult experience to determine whether all bachelors are unmarried, nor whether 7 plus 5 equals 12, all right? Now, an a posteriori proposition is one observation based on experience, okay? This proposition is validated by and grounded in experience, therefore it's logically contingent on something in the real world, on a phenomenon, okay? The examples of a posteriori propositions include all bachelors are unhappy, or tables exist. Both of these propositions are a posteriori. Any justification then would require one's experience. All right, now, how does all this fit together? If we realize that there are these two different basic distinctions between knowledge claims, then potentially we could recognize 4 different kinds of knowledge claims, okay? Analytic a priori, and we do recognize those all the time. We recognize that 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's an analytic a priori knowledge claim, okay? So we know that category has members in it. There are many members in the category analytic a priori, all right? This is where I should raise the screen. Synthetic a priori, that's the magic category. It is. This is where you have to do the exotic move, the exotic metaphysical move. The synthetic a priori, remember I already drew attention to that. Synthetic a priori is the magical category, and guess what? The categorical imperative and all of our moral truth claims for Kant, for neo-Kantians, all are examples of this kind of proposition, a priori synthetic proposition, okay? So the third type, analytic a posteriori, is just who the hell would even be interested in that, right? I mean, that's for one thing, it's just contradictory, right? I mean, analytic means it's just there, it's locked in. You don't need to look back on anything. You don't have to have any experience. The whole point of it. So this doesn't exist. Everyone agrees. The neo-Humeans and neo-Kantians agree this just is never going to happen, and there's no point in anything like that happening. All right. When it comes to a posteriori claims, they are all here. Okay, I should use a different color. This is where this category has numerous. Okay, I'll just put numerous members of this category, and then even more probably, far more numerous members, right? Many a posteriori synthetic judgments we make all the time. And we go study science, including social science, psychology, sociology, economics. We study all kinds of scientific subjects in order to accumulate our store of a posteriori synthetic judgments, right? Because we need them to prosecute our lives, to go forward with our lives in any kind of sensible and reasonable manner. We have to have a lot of knowledge. But many people, including the neo-Humeans, say that when it comes to moral truth claims, they can only be founded on a posteriori judgments. And so the best you can do is ask people how they feel. And then it may be like you might make this exotic move like Adam Smith does and postulate this kind of group feeling that everyone shares biologically, genetically, somehow. that would be the substrate of some kind of universal claims, but your claims would still be a posteriori because they'd be based on feeling, right? Kant wants to say that our moral claims must be based on reason alone, and for them to be really moral claims, they have to be synthetic a priori judgments, all right? And then his big life work, he has a lot of different life works, but one of his life works is to show us how that's possible. And if you want to know how Kant shows, what he says about all that, then you have to start reading some Kant. And obviously, you should start with groundwork for the metaphysics of morals. And then for those of you who are really ambitious, you can go on and read the Critique of Pure Reason. This famous trilogy is the Critique of Pure Reason, the Critique of Practical Reason, and the Critique of Judgment. All right? The trilogy of critiques. So now you can go and talk like that and impress everybody. Right? Talk about the trilogy of critiques. Tell your friend that you're going to borrow your other friend's copy of Critique of Pure Reason. Right? Now, hopefully, anyway, Kant is fascinating. He really is. And he's probably the most important philosopher of the last 500 years. Not because of his accomplishments, although they were vast as well, but because he was asking these key questions that turned out to be the questions around which much of modernity and modern philosophy and cultural developments turn on, right? These questions about the metaphysical status of the human being, right? You notice all these Enlightenment kind of developments are happening politically, including the establishment of this country called the United States, right? Around that time frame. And so anyway, Kant does probably more to kind of crystallize the thinking that goes on when we postulate the dignity of the human being. And that's why he's been so influential, and most great philosophers since Kant have been Kantians of one kind or another. Because it's just very hard to separate once Kant laid down all his work, it was hard to separate yourself, right? It's hard to continue doing philosophy without responding somehow. Anyway, okay, but this is what's fascinating about what some environmental ethicists are claiming, right? They're claiming that we can establish a priori judgments about how we ought to transact with natural resources, how human beings ought to treat natural resources, right? And neo-Humeans would say, well, we can't really come up with that a priori stuff. We can do that a posteriori, we can show what's good for us consequentially, but we can't show in advance. But anyway, this may be, like I was saying, that spiritual component of the Leopoldian argument, that the questionable metaphysical commitment, it's all right in there, isn't it? So, and from that we move to this wonderful portrayal, and that could be, Leopold's life work could be thought of as some trying to translate that experience of the noumenal realm that he experienced when he was outdoors and when he understood, after decades of working in the field, he understood how all these different entities interact with each other, right? And his work, most of the essays in Sam County Almanac are not really philosophy essays the way the land ethic is, but are more like sketches about nature, nature writing, ecology writing. But what he's doing in all of his sketches is he's showing us these necessary universal relationships among all these different entities. And he's showing us that if we don't observe these relationships, then at the very least we can say very bad consequences are going to ensue. And because, and then on top of that, because we know with such certainty that these consequences are going to ensue, that perhaps our reasons are even stronger. Perhaps because we understand these laws, right? And these laws are universal. The law that can't be changed. Right? Anyway. Okay, so let me turn this back on. Now, incredibly important. Look, I very rarely, I'm getting more creative with my slides, but for Kant and for all neo-Kantians, neo-Kantian moral knowledge claims. Okay, that's just a big fancy, that's a Kantian way of saying normative claims. Normative claim is kind of the generic, all right? For example, it is true. This is how a neo-Kantian explains a normative claim. He says, when you're making a normative claim, what you're saying is that it is true that, except you have an obligation not to harm elderly people, whatever they're moral, right? It is true that you are morally obligated to do X or not do X, right? And for Kant, these claims are all instances of synthetic a priori knowledge. Okay? Hume and all the neo-Humeans deny the very possibility of any kind of synthetic a priori knowledge. All right? To a neo-Humean, the fundamental error of the neo-Kantian is to claim access to a transcendental, noumenal realm, a realm of absolute ideas where knowledge of moral norms is both a priori, okay, like mathematics or formal logic, and a perfect map, mapping the real world, right, of our real life, which is magical, isn't it? How could that, imagine if you could really come up with that and demonstrate that. That would be so cool, wouldn't it? Which is why Kant's work is so tantalizing. And why many people, really will work very hard to defend it. Because it sounds like he's finally made sense of something, right? A mathematical model of morality that isn't just analytic a priori statements like 2 + 2 is 4, right? But is actually corresponds to the different phenomena in the real world, okay? And explains to us our real life practical obligations. Which is presumably what we're doing, right? When we study philosophy, we're not just dancing around in some abstract world. We're actually trying to create conceptual images of what's actually, of the real world, of phenomena. Anyway, okay, so we have plenty of time left, and I will just get right into Christopher Stone. I think I probably went about 5 or 10 minutes longer than I should have. But anyway, so this is most of the valley, I think. I'm not sure. I did go here. Some of the places I talk about I've been to, like I went to Isle Royal with my dad last summer. That was fantastic. And then I also went here with my dad way back, quite a while ago. I don't remember it that clearly, and I'm not sure what part of it. It's not a very big alpine valley, but and I'm not sure if it extends quite a ways this way. In any event, I imagine they had ski resort, skis, chairlifts, planned for up in here. Anyway, this is that famous Mineral King Valley that was the subject of a heated moral struggle for a long time, between about 1964 and 1979. And I shared that story with all of you on Tuesday, and we'll go over a few elements of that story again before we're done with Stone. So, believe it or not, I'm amazed that he doesn't have a Wikipedia page, so I don't know very much about this guy. But he did write this incredibly influential essay, which he subsequently expanded into a book-length essay and published it for a popular audience. For those of you who are interested in reading kind of an expanded version of it. And this essay was written expressly to influence an upcoming U.S. Supreme Court decision. That the U.S. Supreme Court had taken up this case, Sierra Club versus Morton, and it issued its decision in 1972, which I think was the year that Stone's essay was published, although it might have been published a year earlier. Anyway, but again, you notice we're Darwin heavy throughout this course. So many of our authors are clearly influenced by Darwin, and we keep going back to Darwin. Stone gives us an account that's really reminiscent of Leopold's essay. Only Stone is more concerned with the development of law, right? And Leopold is much more concerned with the development of morality.